We'll call the meeting to order. And the next item is approval of the agenda. Hopefully you all have that and have had a chance to look at it. Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? So move. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Next order of business is swearing in the members, new members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got 3 new members tonight. First member we have is Gasper GK. He goes by GK.
GK, right, and it's not can, like you would knock on a
Knock
can. He doesn't spell that way, but that's the way it's pronounced.
He's our first new member. The second new member, we've got Steve Cohen. Third new member, our ETJ representative is Joseph, go by Woody.
We'll go by Woody, correct.
Woody Hubbard. So he's been sworn in and approved by the county. And they're ready to be sworn in for the board here. But if y'all don't mind to step over and Taylor will swear you 3 in for us. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States, the Constitution and laws of the state of North Carolina, and the town of Blowing Rock, not inconsistent therewith, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties to which I have been entrusted as a member of the town of Blowing Rock Planning Board on this 18th day of April 2024.
We appreciate y'all stepping up. I think we finally got a good full board, so welcome. And
Next item is election of officers, and Brian, if you'll take over the first one.
So Bill McCarter is our current chair. And our vice chair,
It was Harrison.
So we'll take nominations for chair first. Anyone like to nominate?
I'm gonna nominate Bill since he's shrugging his shoulders.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nominations for vice chair? Or anyone willing to step up?
I nominate Chris Squires.
And second that.
Chris, you good? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, regular business. This one may look familiar to some of you. Arbor Village, special use permit 2024-01. And we'll let Ryan give us an up-to-date.
Thank you, Chair. I'll get to roll out the site plan here. So before us, we have special use permit 2024-01 Arbor Village. I think that all the other 5 members we have was here at the previous submittal and previous SUP. The applicant obviously went through the recommendation of this board, and then they withdrew the previous application to make some revisions to the plan. So they've resubmitted a new application Tonight, we're looking at special use 2024-01. The applicant is Cash Custom Homes with Josh Cash, and he's with us tonight. With him also Jason Gaston with Valor Engineering. He's the engineer on record for the project. Little brief history. Previous special use permit, which has no bearing on this. I mean, this is a new application, and take it and review it as a new application. There was very minor changes, and we'll get to that of what those changes were. So what they're proposing is a multi-family project now. As you can see, they're looking at basically a townhouse proposal. It's on one lot. So the townhomes will be, basically they're divided onto their own separate lot. They own the property underneath, but it'll be on one parcel. So the project now is considered a multi-family project based on the units and the way it's set up. There'll be four two-family type buildings, 8 units total, and they have proposed 3 bedrooms for each unit now. So there's 24 total bedrooms, 8 units. Is everyone familiar with where this is located? This is right across from the entrance to Food Line, the little metal commercial building there. So it's straight across the road there. It'll front on 321, and the property runs all the way down to Main Street in front of Chatola. Property is 1.367 acres. It is zoned general business. It is located in the WS4 watershed supply watershed. The applicant is proposing entrance to the project here for the right in, right out. And the big change, and I'll go ahead and just kind of let you know, between the previous plan and this plan, there was questions on short-term rentals and the amount of parking. What the change in the plan now is it went to the townhouse proposal, one lot. But the other big change was adding some parking here along Main Street to make up for the additional parking needed. And I'll explain a little bit more about the parking as we go along here. With the property being located in the watershed, it does limit the number of allowable units within the watershed. The ordinance limits them to 7 units. So on the back of your staff report, there is a request for 1 additional unit to bring the total to 8 units. The ordinance does allow you as the permitting authority to review that deviation and allow an extra unit if you see fit on the review. But that is explained in the requested waiver that was on the back of the staff report there. So he's looking at requesting 1 more unit for 8 total. The maximum allowable, this is based on the watershed, the maximum allowable built upon area, there's limitations in the watershed on the percentage of built upon area within the watershed. That limit here is 24% of the entire project site, which is the 1.367 acres. On the plans, Mr. Gaston has broke out the watershed calculations there, so you can see they are under the 24%. So that is within the watershed requirements. The only other requesting that deviation is the one additional unit, which is a watershed requirement as well. But we can provide a deviation for review, and you all have the authority for that. Any questions up to now?
Yeah, I have one question. You mentioned the additional parking down on Main Street. In the staff report, it said the applicant proposed 10 new parking spaces, but I'm only counting 8, and it's 8 plus 8 for a total of 24, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
4
look-
down, 4 in the garage, 4
Yeah, let-
adjacent to the buildings, and 4 down on Main Street.
Let's see.
I'm sorry, 8 and 8 rather,
You're correct. There's 24 total parking spaces.
24 total, no, not 10 additional.
Let me speak to parking here in just a minute. Proposed building height is 31 feet. Should have been elevations in your packet there. 31 feet, that's measured at the primary entrance, which is along Highway 321. That's measured at the grade, adjacent to primary entrance to the top of the roof. 31 feet, with the 712 roof pitch. We do have a 612 minimum roof pitch, so they're meeting the minimum 612 requirement. Now back to parking. So with this proposal, they're looking at a multifamily use, which requires 2.5 spaces for each unit with 3 or more bedrooms, plus 1 additional space for every 4 units in the development. So that requirement requires 21 parking spaces. The other use they would be looking for if they want to utilize it for short-term rental is 1 space per bedroom, which would require the 24 parking spaces. And you're correct, there's 8 on Main Street, but there's 24 total. So they have adequate parking for the short-term rental and the multifamily requirement of the ordinance. Okay? Again, drive access will be off of Valley Boulevard here, right in, right out. And then the other access will be off of Main Street into the proposed parking area here that's along Main Street across from Chatola. The proposed access for this is a path that will lead to the back of the buildings. And the applicants can speak to this a little bit more, but my understanding the access will be on the basement part of the buildings.
Isn't that a private driveway?
So the driveway is an easement on this property. There's an easement in place, and I believe it serves 2 homes. So that they have an easement for it, which I can't remember the total width. I think that's shown for the survey, I think, for the easement, which is basically running through the drive aisle, that parking area there.
Brian, if that's an easement for those 2 homes, was there any thought given to the path following the roadway as opposed to meandering?
This,
Yeah, just that segment that's next to the road, why is it not adjoining the road?
well, this is the access to get into the building.
I understand that, but there are a couple of homes up there that could also use that walkway if it was adjacent to that easement.
I'm not following.
That segment of the pathway.
This?
Yes.
Right.
I wondered whether there was any consideration given to move it over to be like right next to the roadway,
This,
the driveway, yeah.
my understanding, I'll let the applicant explain, was probably a grade reason for grading, to get a better grade with it. Because I know there's probably a hillside here, a slope. As you drive in there to the left, there's probably a slope there for it to enter. So he's probably, they're setting it here for grading and trying to get a better grade on it. Whether there's any talks with any neighbors, I'm not sure. We'll have to ask the applicant there. You're talking about for their use or someone else's?
For their use, yeah.
That's a discussion we'll have to have with the applicant.
You know, the more people you can get walking to Main Street as opposed to driving, the better. So,
Okay.
They walk right down the drive.
they walk down the driveway, so
It's gravel and the path is gonna be gravel.
path is also gonna be gravel.
I'm sorry. Jumping in, I should be.
So the next thing, they are proposing the sidewalk. Every new commercial development is required for ordinance to provide a sidewalk, curb and gutter and sidewalk, and they have provided that.
I did have one question on that.
Sure.
When I looked at the way that the sidewalk currently goes, it stops right at the Chiatola entrance and right by the, what us Louisianans call a canal.
Yeah.
You guys might call it a stream. But their sidewalk will pick up on the other side. There's no connecting there. And there's no, from what I'm understanding, there's no crosswalk on their sidewalk to go on the other sidewalk that would bring you to the shops out there. So what's the purpose of having a sidewalk that doesn't go in either way unless the city or they propose to build a little bridge and then put a crosswalk to go back over like Chiatola does?
Good question. At some point, the town will look at making this connection here.
Okay.
New sidewalks it sometimes moves with development. When the development, it requires it. Is it a path to nowhere? Yes, but the thought is it's progress, and eventually, whatever happens there, it'll connect. We do them call them paths to nowhere sometimes, but
the other sidewalk, like Chiatola, it's just a stripe in the street is what it boils down to, and a little handicap exit.
right. Yeah, I mean, at some point, we'll be looking at making this connection here. It does end back here on the other side of the street right now. Maybe a good question about a crosswalk there. We can discuss that a little bit more. For stormwater management for the project, the applicant has proposed, this is their detention system to detain per the ordinance, 10-year storm. This is covering the whole project, and Jason can explain a little bit more on this proposal there, but this system captures all the impervious area of the project. He's required to release for a certain rate on the property itself. So the upper system handles all the impervious area on the site.
Now, is that just covering the cement part or the paved part? Or, because as we know, we live in the hills, and as I found out in my watershed, that there's a lot more than just the paved part that we gotta worry about.
So impervious includes buildings, the building footprint, it includes sidewalks, it includes the parking areas. So that's taken into account the whole existing impervious area there. They have to basically assess if there's any impervious on the property existing, and there was a very minute amount. So pretty much all the impervious will be accounted for with this system.
It's my understanding that there is some floods in these 100-year rains that happen every year here, that there's some flooding on the other side from the river there. Is that going to affect the flooding for elevation of those parking and everything there too?
No, if you see this line right here,
Right.
it's kind of hard to follow. That's the 100-year floodplain. Things can be built in the AE or the 1% 100-year floodplain. The actual floodway, I'm not sure if it may be that line right there. So you are limited in what you can build there, but as far as parking in that area, there's no issues.
Okay.
Not saying that it won't get up and flood, but that's the 100-year floodplain. You got the 1% chance there. Water and sewer is being requested as part of this project to access existing service lines. The service lines are utilities here. Utilities will be out the back of the buildings. This is the sanitary tie-on here on the town system. And then the water will also be timed and metered in that location right there. You can see the edge of the parking right there. But they've got access to water and sewer there. There is water and sewer up here, but it just wasn't viable to connect to that because it's on the other side of the highway there. The pictures that's in your staff report, the white looking building is the building form that they're proposing. The applicant is, I've spoken with him, they are open to being flexible with the materials that's used. We had conversations with making everything a little bit more in context with the corridor itself there. So the other pictures you see are not of the buildings proposed. Those are for color and material references only. So I think what they're looking at is they're willing to provide a good nature blend in color and material. The one picture that you see that was provided there. The one picture that you saw the back of the building where it's really tall was the thoughts to try to provide materials on the bottom of that foundation so it's not a huge concrete gray look. And y'all can ask the applicant questions on that, but I think they're willing to be flexible with the materials and colors there. The applicant is also proposing as part of the site work there'll be several retaining walls proposed, especially on this end here. There'll be retaining walls in between. And then on the south end here, we've got one wall proposed right there. At the back of your packet, there's also a waiver request or deviation request. Our ordinance does require a maximum of 12 foot for retaining wall heights. Staff took the position that this is a wall that you'll be looking at. It's kind of in the same plane. So the applicant has separated the walls and provided, I think it's 8 feet in between these to allow buffering. On the landscape plan, they are planning some evergreen plantings and some buffering between those to help disguise the wall, knock the height of the wall down a little bit. They are subject to certain wall materials. We've been in discussion with them on the materials, and that's to be decided. I think and I'll let them speak for this, I think they're willing to be flexible in what the town and ordinance requires for the wall material there to be a good close match to a native looking rock or block type retaining wall. And you can ask the applicant the thoughts on that, of what may be proposed, but that is up for discussion, and I think they're willing to discuss that. This is preliminary landscaping. The basis for the plan is to provide, they're gonna have to provide a street yard out front. They're required a 16-foot buffer here based on the uses. I have a street yard here. These buffers will be assessed on what existing vegetation is there. If it suffices to meet that requirement for a 16-foot buffer, we'll accept it. If not, we'll have to assess and provide supplemental vegetation for that. That'll go also for the bottom buffer here. I think the applicant explained that they're trying to preserve as much of that rhododendron and good native look along that as they can there. And you can kind of see that in the photos that's in your packet there. There is in that retaining wall waiver, Mr. Gaston explains the reasoning for using these 3 walls instead of possibly dropping down, and it's to save a little bit more vegetation in that area. Those walls are at 12 foot. He stepped those at 12 foot. I think the bottom one here, I think it's around 7 feet, I believe. This one over here, I think, ranges from like 12 feet down and dives into the wall there. There was, I think, a 30-inch tree in this area right here that requires town council approval to remove a type of tree. That tree is, let me see. This tree right here. So that's their limits of construction. That'll be below the utilities. So that tree will be probably damaged some on the upper side. So for removal of that tree, the ordinance technically requires town council approval for that. So that's why it's listed in here. If the project's approved, a lighting plan will need to be submitted, meeting the ordinance requirements, which is typically our standard black coach light around town. So the applicant will need to submit a lighting plan at the time. The applicant will also need to submit an erosion control plan, but this is for review after the project's approved. And then going back again, the 2 requested waivers need to be looked at and discussed and weighed out. One for the additional unit from 7 units to 8 units, and then a deviation for the 12-foot high multiple walls there. That's all I've got. Questions?
Can you go back to the site plan again for a moment? Yeah, on the north end, I appreciate the reason for terracing the retaining wall. But now you've got the 2 parking spots for those units in the roadway. And my question is, and maybe it's not possible, but did anybody consider a connection now or in the future to the north, to the adjoining town-owned property, so that access could be had jointly?
From this?
Yeah, or is the topography just not possible?
I don't think it's feasible there. Chatola owns a little part of that side, and it's a fairly big ravine in that area right there. So I really don't think it's feasible.
It's not feasible.
Hear from applicant?
We probably need to swear them in. No, okay. Y'all are laid back. Any more questions, and we can introduce the applicant.
It's 4 duplexes, 8 duplexes.
Hello again. If you remember me from last time, if not, welcome, especially those of you that are new here. My name is Jason Gaston. I'm with Valor Engineering. I'm the engineer of record for this project. And if you've seen this before, it looks pretty close to what we presented several months ago. The difference, of course, being some of the feedback that we received, and I'll kind of go through what really drove this change. Let's be clear, it's 4 duplexes, regardless if it's considered multifamily or not. That's how it's been constructed, or that's been the thought process behind the construction from the beginning, which is why we're asking for a waiver from 7 units to 8, because it just makes sense to build a full duplex instead of a half one. So still proposing 4 2-family residences or 4 duplexes, how you really want to look at it. One of the things that came out last time was whenever we have duplex lots, you have 60-foot wide, 60-foot lots, and we had a bunch of easements everywhere. And like, well, who's going to be responsible for this, and who's responsible for that? So one of the things that having a traditional multifamily project allows us to do is, if you look at the lot layout plan that's in there, it makes it really simple. Pretty much you're going to own to your outside walls, and the POA will be responsible for everything else. And that just makes it really clean and simplifies it all. So that was one item. The big item, the big change, was originally we proposed 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, or 3.5 bath units. And the discussion came up really about short-term. How do we regulate that? How can we make sure that people will actually abide by that? Well, there was a lot of discussion about that. I'm of the opinion that you can just regulate that internally through lease agreements, but clearly you have a regulation in place that says you can't. So that was the reason why the owner went back to the drawing board and was like, okay, well, instead of having the 4th bedroom in the basement area, we'll just make that an open space and do traditional 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths with a den. And so that's been the loss of the bedroom that we discussed. In addition, to make sure that if short-term rental by an owner was ever required or wanted, people move or lose their jobs, want to be able to rent, we also had to provide additional parking. So that's the reasoning for the 8 additional parking spaces. Originally, this project only had 16 spaces for 8 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath units. And now we're at 24 parking spaces for 8 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath units. So that's really what drove a lot of these changes. That was a big portion of the discussion that was concerned, and frankly, you had concerns with around town about mitigating parking issues, people parking everywhere, and that's why 1 bedroom requires 1 parking space, period, if you're going to ever do short-term rental. So we wanted to have that flexibility to be able to allow owners to do that legally. So that should take care of that. So everything else is really the same. And for those of you that are new, I'll just kind of give you a brief oversight and synopsis. This project really is slated to be from Blowing Rock Boulevard. That's really the entrance. There's been some discussion about other access points and whatnot. The whole project's going to be visible. It's really at that grade. And so that's how the design fell. And if you think about residential construction versus commercial construction, there's a lot more flexibility with residential construction because you can step down with the grade. The basement's in and crawl space is in. As opposed to a more traditional commercial project where you have 2-bay parking in the front and you'd be forced to have extensive retaining wall or extensive crawl space in the rear. Which is a discussion that was mentioned about what's the real highest and best use for this property. Well, that's still up for you all to decide and talk about. But for us, it made the most sense to do a residential product, mostly because it facilitates us to step down as best as we can with the topography. We can use crawl space again at lower levels for that to facilitate living space. So that's really what drove the entire design, was we're Blowing Rock Boulevard, we're walking out of our front doors onto Blowing Rock Boulevard, getting the sidewalk right there in front of us, and then we're walking up and turning to go downtown. Having the additional parking in the back is certainly a requirement, and that's why we facilitated a long walk to those. To answer your question, there's a substantial amount of grade change from those lower parking spaces to the crawl space area for these units. And so that's why we're going up, and we're not following the same grade of this easement. We're going up to try to basically, as you do with most trail construction, you'll do a switchback to get up to those elevations. So that's why we've always advocated and want people to use the front of these buildings, which is, of course, the Blowing Rock Boulevard side. There was originally some discussion about, well, what about facilitating access down in the sidewalk here? And I think I submitted some type of drawing essentially showing the length of sidewalk for somebody to walk, the amount of grade change they have if they walk down here, back up to downtown versus they just walk out here, down, Sunset. And that's really, again, the easiest path, which is why, again, the whole project's really been fronted along Blowing Rock Boulevard. A couple other things to address. As far as DOT, we went through a couple different designs there. For those of you that were not aware of that, originally we had 2 entrances. There was discussion with the town and DOT, and the town wanted us to have 1 entrance. So DOT's seen this. There's been a lot of communication about that, and that's why we've gone to 1, which is the same as you've seen before if you were here previously. Really, other than that, it's 4 duplexes, and that's what I'm doing. Again, why we're back really is to facilitate a little bit more ease in regards to common areas and those kinds of things. And most importantly, to facilitate allowable use for short-term rental with adequate parking for that. One other thing, I'll just mention this, now I'm switching gears completely about stormwater. Stormwater is going to be captured as best as we can with the detention system up at the top. But stormwater systems always have bypasses, what it's called. You can never capture every drop. So what you do is you over-detain in the upper portion of the basin to allow for the lower basin to go undetained. So for instance, we're going to take an aggregate point, let's just say this right here, and I'll use nerd numbers. 10 CFS is what we have to get to. Well, if this flows at 4, then the maximum I can do here is 6. And I'll over-detain in this area to make sure that I don't ever exceed where my final point of discharge is. So that's an exercise of simply oversizing the detention system to facilitate over-detention for anything that's bypassed. But bypass is common in stormwater design because, again, you can just never place a pond to where it captures everything. Even if it's a pond itself slips on the banks, you're going to be bypassed. So that's how the lower parking lot is addressed. It's going to sheet flow for water quality purposes through the buffer. But we're over-detaining in the upper basin to facilitate lower flows. So hopefully that kind of addresses that question. So in the end, that's Arbor Village. 4 duplexes, adequate parking now for short-term rental, and hopefully that answers some of your questions, but I'm sure you have some more. If there's operational questions or things about colors, that's not me. I don't pick colors, just ask my wife. Josh is here for that, and he can talk to you about materials and those kinds of things, but anything engineering related or design related, I'd be happy to do my best to answer your questions there.
What are the width of the parking spaces up, not the gravel ones, but the parking spaces up on 321, what are the width?
Standard size require 9 by 19.
Okay. So do you have any ADA?
That's because a single family duplex is not required.
Even though it's a multifamily 24 space project?
Correct. Yeah, that's the issue here with, we're zoning law for this, but it's going to be constructed as single family attached. So again, single family, no ADA requirement for parking.
I think I know the answer to this, but let me ask anyhow. There was no opportunity to do a deceleration lane, even a short decel lane. Curb cuts, it's great that there's only one in out, right turn in, right turn out, but this is not a residential neighborhood, and you got people coming down Valley Boulevard at 50, 60 miles an hour illegally. And
I mean, that's not what the posted speed limit is, but I hear what you're
I
saying.
get it's 35, but nobody goes 35 hardly.
So I think you've seen this a lot with other commercial projects or any residential projects that's mentioned on 321. Whenever you're dealing with an existing retaining wall that's already there, DOT is not ever required that, especially for something that's generating as few traffic numbers as this is. I think I submitted this in the first time. You're looking at roughly 8 trips per hour, the peak hour in the morning for this. So it doesn't really warrant in any stance of the idea, it doesn't warrant a decel lane from their traffic standpoint. So it's been looked at by the DOT, they agree, and that's why we don't have it. Doesn't warrant the traffic counts.
DOT's already issued a permit.
They haven't issued a permit, but yeah. We didn't want to get one and then have to scrap it if you all, or whatever, we didn't make it through the process, but they have already seen it, been on board, and they're waiting for our formal application.
Yeah, what's the distance to the next nearest curb cut going southbound? Do you know?
Southbound, is it, Airtain Engineering?
That's what I'm thinking.
One building has a packet, that's probably the one in the south.
I think there is a curb cut on the vacant property
Right.
going north there.
But it's a vacant piece of property.
This probably may well be a Josh question, but Brian had mentioned appearance, and I guess what kind of commitments are there, particularly to the backside, both materials, but also screening, vegetative screening?
Can you pull up the renderings? The SketchUp model that I did to kind of show that. And then Josh can answer some of that. I want to address one of those things. Let's look at the rear view. That's, yeah. Perfect. You all see that? So one of the ways to address some of this from a material standpoint, first of all, is to set per footer. So that you have just a common footer all the way across, and that's, nice and before we can do real easy silt lake construction, but it looks really bad. So I know that one of the things that we've talked about using on other projects is at least stepping the footer. And I put this in here mostly just for general view, and he can talk to you about materials. But I did want to make the point, from a construction standpoint, you will be stepping the footer down on both the sides, which you may have saw, seen previously there, and this is the back, so that it'll be more of your wood material and not just concrete or crawl space or whatever it is. So if you have specific questions about materials, I'll leave that. But there is an effort to step down the footer to maximize the amount of wood availability for material construction for that.
Okay, so I'll restate my question, and again, I understand it's not you, but what commitment is there in relation to appearance, particularly from the backside of the building? I understand step down footers, but that's not what people are going to be looking at, truly.
I don't think you'll have any issue of commitments about materials, so if you're specifically asking one.
Hey, again, Josh Cash Custom Homes for those that weren't here last time. So, as good as Jason is in the civil, he wanted to show this, we wanted to show some representation of the height. But this is not a final design by any stretch. It's SketchUp, and what my intention is, as we kind of move a step or two further, I've got a local architect firm that would actually do the design, the renderings, that would kind of create that final package inside and specifically outside. We've got floor plans that we like, but the outside is always important. I live here. I'm one of the biggest drivers for this over commercial and some of the other things that were originally kind of thrown out in front of me was the appearance and keeping the rhododendron buffers. So all of that's still in play. And so the one thing, it doesn't really kind of show it, but it does help to soften when you've got a siding material rather than stucco or masonry. And then, the decks, even little things like brackets in the decks can help kind of just draw your eye. Plus, you're going to have rhododendron vegetation that fills this in too. So, overhangs, changes of material, those are all things that that we'll strive for when we kind of move into the architecture. And then even these are some colors that we've done elsewhere, basically with design, architect, and some interior design help. We find colors that kind of fit with some of the surrounding businesses and homes in the area. There are some of the pictures that were in that packet were representations from other properties that are as taller, like that one that I'm looking at is taller. So there are ways to do it that, with change of material, change of color. Some of the bracing they've done has been for structure. And I think Jason's got on that looks much taller than what we're talking about. But you've got work back, you've got shape, you've got, what foundation is exposed is painted to match the body color. The decks really help, add some depth. And then I think with the rhododendron and some of the natural that we already have, you're gonna have a much better screen, tell me if I'm wrong, than like a landscape buffer that they're showing here. So that'll help soften some too. Yeah, here's another one that maybe looks like Blue Ridge Mountain Club. Kind of similar design. You've got stone, you've got shape, you've got board and back, and then you're stepping off the back, but you have breaks. Even between siding here, you see a band that runs across that breaks the board and batten from a shape material. All that just kind of adds a little bit of dimension to it, so it doesn't just look like a big box. We've got to produce something that can sell, and Blowing Rock has a charm, and people want to see that. To sit in a kind of a stripped down product, this will be something that has nice curb appeal, something that would market well. So.
Can you walk me through how the path from the lower level parking gets to the townhouse and then how you get into it from the back?
Yeah, so one thing that, if you go back to that one rear elevation, we do have these tall crawl spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even if you use that one for example. So where this lower deck band is, right here, we would have an internal staircase that drops down into this level, and then there would be a door that enters onto that path.
Okay.
So we're not gonna have big, massive staircases. We wanted
Gotcha.
to keep the staircases integrated so that, they're inside and there would be a door that brings it out, so that doesn't clutter things up.
And what do you envision the gravel being? Is it like crushed one, or is it something a little bit more decorative?
I hadn't really thought about it, but in other projects where we've had to do nature trails, we've used a combination of mulch, we've used larger river rock. So I'm open to, I hadn't thought that far.
The ordinance actually requires a hard surface. It can be of different materials, but it requires it to be a good solid surface. So we'll have to look at the materials
So it
on
won't
that.
wash away.
We want something that people can use, but we also don't want to, create a massive sidewalk or anything that creates a cut that takes rhododendron or takes things along that right of way or on the side, neighboring properties or even on Main Street. So it's kind of a balance. Yeah, even something like your carriage trails and stuff, where it's a chat, something that binds that you can maintain, I think would be a good choice.
And I didn't see this in our ordinance, but are there handrails that are required based on the grade or any of that?
We'll assess that with our building inspector.
Okay, okay,
If there's a requirement, it would be in the building.
okay.
I haven't run into that before, Jason, on other nature trail projects. I haven't had to in the past for a trail, but,
So just out of curiosity, you keep calling it a trail.
yeah.
Is there a reason for that as opposed to calling it a path or a walkway? Does that give you certain?
I don't think.
I think I call it a walkway in the plans, so.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've got 30 feet of elevation change between fairly short period of length between the parking lot and the first unit where it connects. Do you not think that stairs would be a more reasonable expectation, especially thinking that, you know, you've got people that may be carrying luggage or groceries or something like that, maybe been shopping, carrying bags up, that would preclude maybe having less steep, maybe steeper, you know, landing steps, landing guardrails, lighting. You're, at least in here, you've got to propose this mulch. So is that out? Doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter.
What about an impervious surface?
Again, if it needs to be stone or whatnot, that's fine. It doesn't really matter to me. I'll explain to you why I did the stairs. Because it would god awful. Whenever I was going straight down, you understand how many stairs you're allowed to have before you have a landing. And so I had just as many landings for that. And it was just, well, let's just think about it here. In my opinion, this is the dialogue I had. I'd rather have a lengthy trail that's at least walkable, or whatever, that's reverse stairs. I prefer to not traverse stairs because they're going to be a little more dangerous in general. So that's why I chose a trail. So is there a right or a correct answer for that? No, this is just judgment. So if you want us to examine looking at stairs, we can. But I originally did. I even had shared landings in between the decks coming down. And I just felt like I felt like pretty much anybody can walk up a trail, but not everybody can walk upstairs. Again, that was just my opinion. And I made the trail longer than stairs would have to be for this reason, because you obviously traverse more grade. So the trail isn't longer, but I felt like it was a better design to facilitate kind of a longer slope than stairs.
Is there a minimum width that you're looking at? I mean, you read the definition of a trail, and a trail there is no width. I mean, at least with a path or walkway or a sidewalk, you got 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet.
I think I proposed 3, but we can go to 4. I mean, there's really not.
Just clearance for people walking by each other and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We can go to 4. I mean, there's really not any issue with that. The length of it and the change in grade is what drove me to put a trail in, or walkway, whatever official word you want to use for it, and avoid having stairs.
Okay. Chris brought this up, and you said it's single-family residential, ADA does not apply. I'm not so sure about that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there has been an opinion out there that states that it qualifies as, it may qualify, new construction, if it's for short-term rental, may be required to be ADA accessible. Does that trail qualify for that, if that is indeed the case?
No.
What would make it qualify?
Well, for an ADA, so we're going to talk about accessible route. Accessible routes, max of 8% slope, and that's the limit over 30 feet, and you have to have a landing. 8% to 5% requires a handrail, and 5% or less, you don't have to have a handrail. So right now, it's graded more aggressively than that. I think roughly 10 to 12% was what I graded it as.
So, Brian, obviously, does the town need to take a look at this? I'll be happy to provide you the opinion.
You can. My speaking with our building inspector was, it's based on the number of units, would be what triggers that. And he didn't feel like that triggered on this based on those number of units.
So there wouldn't be any liability, so to speak, on the town if they issued a permit without ADA compliance and
Well, let's talk about
short-term
ADA compliance for the units then, because if you're going to have true multifamily construction, we need type A units, and we also need convertible units. Well, none of these units have bedrooms on the first floor. So again, this is why we've stayed with the exact same plan we saw the first time, which is duplex. Two-family construction, still considered single family. You have stairs walking into these. That's not ADA compliant. You can't have stairs at all. So no duplex, no single family, individual single family dwellings.
I get that. What I'm trying to tell you is that there is a possibility, at least remotely, that this may actually fall under ADA compliance. And that's all I'm trying to ask is, do we need to talk with
It'd be
the
based
town council and get an opinion
No, I mean, our building inspector,
Building code's gonna take care of this.
You don't have to worry about, if it's building code, it's really outside of your purview,
Okay, so opinions and things like that, we don't even need to be concerned
their
about.
opinions.
Okay,
If-
All right.
If it's in the building code and these general statutes, it's really beyond the planning board's scope.
all right. So in the statutes, so it's jumping around here so much. 161412-2, unsubdivided development, pedestrian traffic safe passage. I'm not quoting it directly. Does that apply at all to this situation?
what was the heading again?
1412-2,
The next part.
unsubdivided development for pedestrian traffic. This is unsubdivided development, isn't it?
It's subdivided, there's 8 lots. There's not, you couldn't give 8 lot.
So even though they're not purchasing land, it is
They're purchasing land under your.
underneath, but out to the walls, okay.
I mean, John, it's based on the number of units in a multifamily. It didn't cross the threshold of the number of units. But that, building plans will be reviewed by for the building code.
Okay. All right.
Josh, how many square feet are each of these units currently as you've got them designed?
Jason, you know that big?
Yeah, it's roughly 2,700 square feet overall for stories, roughly 900 square feet per story.
And what are you looking at as a price point?
I'm not there yet. No, I don't know that I have an answer for that.
Well, where I'm leading with this is, if you were to build 3 buildings, have 6 units, there's no reason for the, a waiver. You wouldn't need parking off of Main Street. The units would be bigger, obviously more expensive. You might even eliminate short-term rental all in the process. And, at this point in time, I'm not real sure what we need here is more short-term rental. What we need is housing. Now, whether or not it'd be affordable, that's another question. But if you're gonna have people moving here, I don't know, 2,700 square feet is not a bad size, but on 3 levels, that makes it potentially harder. So I'm just curious as to why you wouldn't want to have just 3 buildings, 6 units, bigger units, maybe more expensive, like I say, but eliminate all of these issues that we're discussing and getting into the minutia about.
I will say that my goal is to keep it south of $1 million.
Okay.
So if you cut out units, it's $1 million product. And in a lot of ways, that does force that family moving in or, somebody retiring. It's gonna, the more expensive it is, the larger it is, the more it's gonna push it to short-term rental. So.
I'm talking about living space. You can still have 3 bedrooms, 3 baths and have a bigger living area, bigger kitchen. It could be more like a home versus a condominium or a 3-story townhouse that's gonna be conducive to short-term rental.
Yeah, I guess growing up here too, I'm trying to make things as, more attainable where it's not a 7-figure price point.
That's getting to be harder and harder to
It
do.
is.
even
The number I have in my head, that's, it's tough. It's very tough.
And you're gonna make a profit.
And that's where, 1 unit makes or breaks it because of that. These are not chestnut, product. This is something that, is gonna be a tier below that, matches maybe some of the other townhome products that have, some of the older ones, That's kind of the price point that I'm leaning toward more than well over $1 million.
It just seems like you're putting in an awful lot of money for extra parking, trails, paths, or walkways, whatever you want to call it, and then having to worry about, parking, where with 3 buildings, you would have an issue even along Main Street. Along 321, you'd have enough parking right there for all the units.
And I even thought of, you know, with that third parking, yes, the short-term rental is a driver of it for buyers, but, you know, if a couple buys that home and they want a family member to come in, you know, a couple's gonna have 2 vehicles, well, where's that family member gonna park? You can't have a guest. So what that does, having one extra parking space allows, you know, the grandkids and kids to come in and stay for the weekend. They can pull in, you know, quickly unload, go down to kind of that overflow, that third parking space, park, and be able to utilize it, where otherwise, you know, they can't. You know, you've got 2 residents in there with a third bedroom, there's no extra parking. And then if they do, where are they gonna go? They're gonna find some other spot in and around town that's already starved for parking. So that's why it was pretty important to get that, you know, not solely for short term, or it's just for the use of the person that buys it. You know, having guests or family and friends over.
Well, you may end up with a public parking lot right next door to you on the north side of your property.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard different things being thrown around with that, but.
Okay.
Can we circle back on the rear of the buildings again? I know we talked about the back of the units, but what we haven't really addressed is the retaining walls between the units. You've got 2 walls that are 12 feet, and I believe one that's 10 feet. Is that correct? What kind of sight lines are we talking about? How visible are they? Should they be screened? What kind of materials are, you know, is that a poured concrete? Is that a block wall?
Can you pull up the grading plan, C2? C2, the grading plan. So here, there's 3 here. Again, we're doing the best we can to preserve all this. Remember, this is the buffer here. We've got all this extra buffer, so this certainly would buffer with natural vegetation, existing vegetation. As far as the kind of block, I'm not a block picture guy, sent something and it was not good, so Kevin actually sent us something that was used with the hotel that's right here. Those site walls, that was a block that's usable. It will be a block, a stacked block wall. It can't be tied into the foundation. That's too much structural issue for, you know, tying side walls to your foundation. So it's going to be a block wall, it'll be stacked. What it looks like in the end, I'm assuming it's going to be pretty similar to what you see there at the hotel. Again.
So is that interlocking block, Brian? Concrete?
There's variations of that block and how it's built, but it is a lock-in type block.
I'll say this, there's opportunities to add, certainly some plantings. Can you scroll up a little bit more so we can all get this thing? There's no, I mean, again, you've got several trees here that are already shielded in this, you've got the trees below that one that are shielded. The northernmost wall, that's the pinch point. That's probably where, if you wanted to add some vegetation, we would certainly not be opposed to that. There's no risk of adding anything below that wall. But I mean, these units here are pretty well shielded with the existing vegetation, but I don't think there's any disagreement. We could screen them.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying if I just don't know the sight lines. I mean, I've stood down there and tried to imagine this, and I just don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So I assume that the ones on the north end are going to be fairly visible.
Yes, and those are the ones where, you know, on the landscape plan, I did certainly propose some evergreens below those walls. Maybe, you know, fine to do those here. The others, I'm not actually worried about. I'm really not worried about this one, but again, screening is.
You're not opposed to it?
No. I mean, I'm not from an engineering standpoint.
All right, so that brings up a couple of other things. I guess we'll talk about the walls. I do want to talk about the landscaping at some point. All right, you got 3 walls there on the north end, 12, 12, and 7. The bottom one's 7.
Yes.
8 feet between each wall. Has there been any discussion about changing maybe the the distances between them, even pushing that lower wall out and moving the middle wall out, only to give variation to what you see and how your eye perceives it. In other words, almost you could change, instead of just putting arborvitae, arbor T, I've been trying to pronounce that all day. Sifting up and putting in, there's recommended vegetation in Appendix E 10 through 16 that is quite extensive. That includes not only conifers, but deciduous as well, trees that might blend very nicely, even though they drop their leaves in the wintertime. Again, I don't think you're opposed to changing out that. The only reason I don't like those trees is that they've been used so much for screening purposes that now every time I see one, I know they're screening something. I know what they're trying to hide. So would you consider, or what would happen if you moved those out, say allowing maybe higher vegetation lower or higher vegetation upper, just kind of gave it a different look?
Sure. So.
Is that possible?
It's certainly possible. Yeah, the expense is we lose more of the natural vegetation that's there.
Okay.
I get that. That's why I went with it facilitates some decent shrubbery. Again, I don't want massive tree roots growing through grids from an engineering standpoint, but we could certainly push it to 12 feet and we would just lose, the lower wall will get a little taller. We're 7 feet roughly, so we've got some more height sphere there. It's just a matter, would it affect that perch, and are we trading off the loss of existing vegetation there in exchange for more planted stuff?
But if that was a recommendation by planning or by the planning board, that would not be opposed, is that correct? Okay.
There's nothing that would bother me. We've got some room to extra I can play with that lower wall. We're 8 feet, so if you want to go 10 or 12 to facilitate more vegetation and more screening, I have no issue with that.
Okay.
Again, at the expense of the loss of more existing vegetation.
Equal and opposite reactions. Yeah. Gotcha. As far as materials go on that wall, I mean, there's extensive DOT walling there. I mean, it's that pressed concrete that makes it look like stone. Very nice, I think, personally. Is there would that be something that you would consider to try to blend in with the surrounding retaining walls in the area?
Well, I think that's where we came up with the block that we did. I proposed a block from Ridge Rock called Hickory Blend, which you may have seen around. It was not considered to be in harmony with the natural materials. So I just asked, hey, what other projects have had stuff? The only one I'm familiar with is John Winkler's project there at the Getaway, where he used the big Lovin block walls. So that's where Kevin sent me the product for what they used here. It looks very nice in my opinion. So that's what we prefer to use. The stack wall product's always easier to build, easier to maintain, as opposed to a cast in place monster like DOT build. So I would prefer not to do that, but it could be discussed. I'm not sure what the benefit would be other than it matched that wall. And then you're in the discussion of, okay, well, does that wall even look like natural rock around the area? Which, I sent Kevin a picture of the blowing rock. I mean, what color is that? They look pretty to me because I think it looks nice, but is that wall, if it's all colored and painted, is that natural? I'm an engineer, I can't really say that, just in my opinion, it's not. So, but it looks nice. My wife would love to have that color. But again, that's why I think the block that's used there at the hotel or something similar to that looks just as good. It's probably a little bit more natural looking than what you'd see, or at least have a better shot of seeing that than we see on the DOT wall. So, but again, opinion here.
Right, I'm just trying to gauge your willingness to meet.
I mean, if you have a certain block or something like that,
the only thing that would worry me is, as a specialty contractor, I've done stamped concrete, that's always, flat surfaces. So a specialty contractor and then the upkeep and, trying to find people I think it'll be a challenge. I've been in residential construction, I've never done a vertical stamp like that on anything residential. I wouldn't know where to start.
Is there anything out there that can get close to what it looks aesthetically?
Well, I think there's some segmental blocks, like your traditional stacked, hand-stacked retaining wall blocks that are, you know, have engineering behind them, but now they've created these stone faces on them. And some of the products that Jason's referring to, you know, have that. So they kind of interlock and they have more of a stone look rather than a cut face cinder block look, right, Jason?
Our discussion initially with what they proposed was a modular block that had a more formal, straight line look to it. Because there's so many other products out there that gives you a good stacked stone look or more natural stone look on it. From a staff's opinion, I was just trying to stay away from a commercial modular block. There's options out there. The commercial appearance standards of our ordinance does require a material that is rock-like. Maybe a little subjective there, but some of the things we'd sent back to them, we felt like was more of a good natural stacked stone look. And some of those were more like a facing type block. So that was where we had conversation started with that. But I feel like.
So they don't like the stack block as long as it looks like.
Right.
As opposed to.
I think if the applicants agree to, you know, some of the materials we'd sent, we felt like meets the ordinance requirements. If they're willing to, you know, look at options that we have, I mean, we're fine with that.
Well, I think the material that you sent me for the hotel, that block seemed fine. Right. You've also probably seen that. I mean, I think it looks nice. Again, is it natural? Does it look like, you know, but it's appealing to the eye, so I'll be certainly from an engineering standpoint, I have no truck in this, you know, race really. I'm fine with it as long as it's stacked.
That's kind of an example of a segmental block, but it has a stone face rather than a masonry face.
Gotcha.
So I think a lot of our ordinance, the goal is to, a lot of times use a more natural native rock. But obviously the larger retaining walls would make that prohibitive. So I think you know, what the ordinance does allow to step outside of that and to use a, you know, culture top stone, it's just a matter of finding one that matches and blends in.
To answer your willingness though to work with that, I mean, from my standpoint, I have no prefers to, I mean, I'm sure Josh, they can talk about colors and looks way better than I can, so I'm totally willing to work with it.
And we would, as a staff, we would have to rely on something engineering wise that would work for the site as well. I mean, we can't just say you have to use this block and if there's an engineering issue with it, you know, we would approach that.
So staff report on this, I believe mentioned that these walls would be substantially reduced with the elimination of number 1 unit or the duplex. And can you speak in greater detail and depth about exactly what that looks like?
Number 1 unit or?
I think isn't that what you referred to, is that it would substantially reduce the size of those walls?
Well, I mean, that's a question for the engineer. I mean, our thoughts was, and the reason we bring it up, the less unit, less space and less parking in that area. But there could be some, where is that wall needed if you lose one unit?
That's kind of what I'm asking.
Can you go back to the green plan?
Sure.
So, yeah, that's perfect right there. So, yeah, if you lose this building completely, you go down to 3 units.
Sorry.
It's magic.
Perfect.
It's
getting to check input terminals there. I don't know if that makes any difference. Input.
So let's go to the northernmost. Again, that's where the site is the most. It's where we're having the most difficulty with topography. That's why the whole site, if you look at it, really is slid to the south. So there's more room on the north end than the south. The grades are just easier here. So sure, if we lost that building up there, those retaining walls would be reduced. How much, I've not really looked at that, but I can certainly say they probably cut it half.
But you still need 3, you think?
Probably 2 is my guess there, because we would still have the issue is it's steep, and you can see how quickly the grade drops off in the corner. We're still gonna have to deal with that because we still have parking in that same general area. So my supposition would be probably still 2 walls, but again, you'd certainly gain a lot more buffer and probably go from 3 walls down to 2. But yeah, losing that mobility would certainly facilitate less walls and more vegetation.
The 7 dwelling max, that's a blowing rock requirement, not a state watershed requirement. Correct?
Yeah, it's based on the watershed though, but yeah, it's ordinance required.
Yeah. Because the state just looks at it from percentage standpoint, impervious. Once you get beyond single family.
Yeah, the residential density in general business is a town implementation. If you recall, for downtown, central business town center, we removed that limitation.
Correct.
That's why
We
you
didn't
did
do
provide it.
residential business.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me be clear about that. If we were in traditionally zoned R3 or whatnot, we would be asking for this, right? But we're not. We're in general business, which if this is a commercial project, it could be even denser than what we have from a footprint standpoint, from a BUA standpoint. So that's why I was like, well, if we use a smaller footprint, why does the density and from a dwelling unit standpoint really matter if we're still below the watershed? So that was our, but again, in R3, we would not be asking for this because that doesn't make sense when you're in an area that's, again, supposed to be for residential. And here we are in general business where, duplex is allowed, and typically you want to have your most dense stuff in general business. So that was kind of why we framed the waiver the way we did, was because if it's commercial development, we could have even more comfort and not would worry about dwelling units or density per acre. So.
Any other questions?
Yep. Sorry.
No
All
apologies.
right, let's kind of go to the stormwater runoff and let's look at the lower parking area.
Sure.
Okay. I understand you looked at the lot as a whole. You've added capacity to the upper underground to satisfy the code, so to speak, or for the lot. I'm only bringing this up because North Carolina, the state, has designated the Middle Fork as impaired largely due to impervious covered lots above this particular lot. I know we're catching it, but I'm just gonna ask this from a standpoint of, is this something that might be feasible? I'm asking basically for a give here, if it makes sense. The parking lot's draining from the north side to the south side. Correct. And you've got whatever elevation, I think it's 84, and then it goes to 80, or it goes down another 4 feet before it starts hitting the floodplain and then the creek. Is there any concern about the runoff? I know you've got a storm drain there with a catch, isn't that correct?
Yeah, for the sidewalk, correct.
For the sidewalk?
Yes.
So we're replacing all those rhododendrons and with impervious, and it's gonna flow, I assume, to the south, correct?
It'll flow.
That's exactly, okay. Is there anything that you can do, I mean, that would slow that drainage, say through a bioswale or something, or a rain garden, or anything to help protect that creek?
100%. And here's the reason why I didn't. Because if you look in the state stormwater manual, the best way for any stormwater to be mitigated is sheet flow through a natural buffer.
Okay.
So that's why there's no curb and gutter. It's all facilitated this way to sheet flow through the natural buffer. We could certainly put in a constructed bioswale or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of defeats the purpose whenever there's a natural buffer here for it to already sheet flow. And in essence, I'd be tearing up existing vegetation to put in proposed vegetation. So certainly did look at that. And to me, in my opinion, from what, again, the precedent is, you always want to facilitate sheet flow as much as you can through a natural buffer. And that's what we've done with the parking area there. Again, that's why there's no curb and gutter for that portion. And it's why the entire thing is sloped that direction towards the buffer. If you all want us to do that, I would never argue with that, but I would believe it's not in the best interest of the watershed. The best interest for any rain is to always sheet through a natural existing buffer, not through a man-made bioswale. But we could do it. Certainly, we would not be opposed to that if you wanted to do it. But there's a reason why I did not, and that's because facilitation of sheet flow through a natural buffer is the best way.
Just to be clear, I've heard impervious, but it is pervious, because you're not paving that. Right?
No, we are paving it. It is paved, yes.
Okay, I heard gravel before.
Yeah.
Okay, didn't we go through that?
The gravel.
The pathway is what's,
Yeah.
yeah.
The pathway will be some type of stone or whatnot, but the actual parking spaces are paved. Yes. Yeah, I originally proposed them as gravel, and they have to be paved.
I'll speak to the rain gardens. In my experience, the town of Boone did a bunch of single-family stormwater requirements where they required, bio or rain garden scenarios, but you're taking everything on the site and really condensing it into one spot. So when we do get these rains that we tend to get, it would overflow the rain gardens and then create,
Runoff.
a runoff effect.
So you're saying you got better luck with those kind of rains, leaving it exactly how it is?
It would have been better. In most cases, you're better off, downspouts and letting it sheet to a yard or some natural buffer than trying to, have a nice front yard with a rain garden, and then next thing you know, it's overflowing, eroding the bottom of the rain garden. So that's just I thought it was a terrible idea, but.
Yeah, and again, the purpose, you never want to concentrate flow. Anytime you can promote sheet flow, it's always best from a actual speed standpoint and also from fluid settling. It allows settling. So anytime you concentrate it into a pond or anything else, and you have a point fish marsh like here, you're always going to have less opportunity for infiltration and treatment. It's always best to treat stormwater with sheet flow. So, and again, we could do some type of bioretention area there, but it's going to have a predefined outlet because it's going to have to be sized and designed. And then there's going to be a specific location for channelized or at the very least concentrated flow to come out. So that's again why I wanted the sheet flow through the buffer.
Well, I think he said it's the best for the creek is leave it where the way it is.
Yeah.
That's all I need to hear. But thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, I just got one more. Sorry, guys. Let's look at the very last civil plan sheet 4.0 landscape. On 321, Brian, you guys, staff report recommends earth and berms along that. I'm just curious if you would just kind of tell me the good, the bad, why that is preferable over, let's just say, what's recommended in the 321 corridor study with knee-high rock wall.
Bear with me a moment. So ordinance requires that. It's a variety of different things that can be provided. And bear with me while I find that section. So in section 16-21, this is the commercial design, which applies to this project now because it's multifamily. Where the parking lot area is directly visible from the street right away, the streetscaping shall provide a semi-opaque screen or barrier between the right of way and the parking area. The screen or barrier may consist of trees, plants, earthen berms, fences, walls, or any combination thereof.
Okay, so you're
So it gives you
recommending an earthen
flexibility.
berm, right? What I'm trying to figure out is why you recommend, the staff's recommending that over one of those other options.
I think it provides a little bit, and going back to the previous meeting, there was a condition to provide additional vegetation along and in the street yard there. You're limited on how high an earthen berm can be placed out there based on the width of that, but I think staff feels like if you add some berm, it does provide more protection, getting plant material higher. But it can be a combination of earth and berm. You can provide a fence. We do have limitations on fence height within those areas, which is 4 feet. But they could utilize a fence. They can utilize a combination thereof. And that's based on trying to screen a parking area itself if it's along and adjacent to the highway there.
My only thing was just that, it was recommended in this corridor study, that was what, 2019, 2020. And, they showed pictures of what it would look like if they had a rock wall, knee-height rock wall.
That's an option to use. We would have to be conscious of site visibility pulling out. We do have site triangle requirements that have to be met coming in and out of those.
Sure.
But that's, we can deal with that in the final landscape design there.
So you're thinking that with the earthen berm, it's not gonna be, it wouldn't be that's not an issue.
I think the combination of that or, fencing with walls, those all can benefit and provide extra screening, I think.
Okay.
Parking lot is in your face there on the highway.
kind of speak to the berm for just a second, just so there's clear expectation. The landscape buffer is roughly 8 feet wide, so 3-to-1 slopes typically what you want to plant vegetation on. So go over 3 up 1, over 3 up 1. That's 6 feet of the 8 feet. So the berm's will be about a foot high. That's about it. So just want to make sure it's clear. It's not going to be like a 4-foot earthen berm there.
Yeah, I mean, we're not expecting anything
Yeah.
just straight down.
So just so you're clear, it's only gonna be about a foot, 16 inches, 18 inches tall, not 3 or 4 feet.
And the wall would be the same height as well. Okay.
I think there's opportunity to provide a combination of all of that just to get a good natural looking streetscape there.
But, I mean, just to say this wall, this site is really, from the driveway to the property line, what is that, 100 feet? I mean, it's super short, 150 feet. For the right turns out, I mean, there's not much distance there. So you're gonna end up with a 2.5 foot high wall, which in my opinion would look kind of silly, but I mean, I'm not good with aesthetics either. So empathize on that part. But I mean, like whatever happens, it just, because the site is so short relative to the frontage, and, you know, I don't know what DOT's talked to you about, but 40-mile-an-hour design speed, that's 60 feet a second, so you're probably, they want like 150 feet, something like that.
Yeah, well, again, that's why it was better to have in there in the town, in their opinion, have one entrance.
Yeah, yeah.
It gave more room for that. And as far as vegetation goes, just, we can do kind of whatever we want, because we were outside the right of way, so there is opportunity to do whatever y'all want there. It's not requiring encroachment agreements, vegetation, buffers on our property. So the only thing I'll say about a wall, we've run into this before, let's just say you've got a great foot wide buffer, and you have a wall in the middle of it. It only weighs about 4 feet, unless we stagger the wall certain ways for trees to grow. So that's one thing you have to be aware of, is that we'll need to undulate the wall so that there's a root base for a tree, because 4 feet between, essentially, you got an extra foot or two between the sidewalk. So let's just say you have a total 10 feet here, and the wall's running here. It's really not going to facilitate a lot of tree root opportunity. So I just want to say that too, that that's why I've always pushed vegetation. It's the most, to me, easy one to avoid having problems with. First of all, opportunity for things to grow, and then the berm being so small. So just so you know where I'm coming from there, that's why I prefer vegetating. But I don't think there's any issue here about doing whatever, but just want to have the expectation so that when you do see something there, it's understood what it would actually be.
I think at the last meeting, I think the discussion was to provide more evergreen screening there. I think the earthen berm there needs to be a good amount of dirt out there anyway, because it's going to be fairly poor. So I think a combination of, they can meet the minimum standard, but you're well within, obviously like the last meeting, they require extra vegetation to feel it's needed.
What does trash collection look like?
So that's all going to be handled privately, essentially ballet style.
Okay.
So that was one of the things that was discussed, like, really want trash cans placed out here. So that was very purposed, and there is no location for that here. So that's only handled ballet style, privately done. So we just felt like that's especially in the high visibility area here, you don't want a bunch of trash cans going around from 321, so it looks like junk. So I think that was why it's going to be, your trash can will be inside your garage, and then on whatever day somebody's going to come and purposely get it from you. However, the logistics behind that, I'm not sure about, but it is purpose valet.
I would like to point out, there is a few neighbors here, if you so choose to hear them speak. Sure. Come up, introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Fred Berry. I live in Reedsville, North Carolina, at 654 Troublesome Road of all all names. I'm here on behalf of the folks down the driveway that are affected by this. If it's okay, I'm married to one of them, by the way. If it's okay, I'll tell you the history of the story, the history of that property. In the late 1800s, two people were born in this community, Fred Hartley, and he married Stella Irene, I believe was her name, Curley? Right. And so.
Don't mean to interrupt you, but can you reference where your home is?
Sure.
For the record, which I think
You
you're.
know where it is. There it
This is you right here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Thank you.
Address?
Thank you. Right.
What's your address
I
on
don't
the record?
know what it is. I don't get any mail up here. I don't, 412 or something like that. But in any event, Fred married Stella, and they set up there in the early 1900s. He was a farmer, and they lived in the holler below Aho, where Sampson and his place, I'm told, called Dismal down there. But they moved out in the early 1900s with two of their children, and they ultimately had 6. They bought that place, and it was, I think, 6 or 8 acres. And Fred was a teacher and a carpenter. His wife raised the 6 kids, but had chickens and cows and had milk cows. She had her milk cows up the hill. And when they came to put the bypass in, they had to bisect their house. And they asked Fred and Stella whether they wanted to put a tunnel in under the road for the cows. And legend has it, I never knew her, but Granny legend says, oh no, there's not going to be much traffic here. We don't need a tunnel under the highway. And then, of course, now there's that big old highway there. And over time, this place, Fred died, all his children died. One of his children was Dare. Dare is my wife's mother. And sitting here is Betty Green, and Betty's mother. Betty's father was Vaughn, not born with the family, but it's a little bit of fun Blowing Rock history as it relates to this body and the town council, because Betty's mother was Helen Hartley. And Helen, I don't know if anybody here knows of or ever heard of Helen. Helen was a town council member for a long time. She was a realtor, and she was a firebrand of a female who drank liquor and smoked cigarettes and cussed like a sailor. And so it's just, it doesn't relate, but it's fun to know a little bit of the background, and I want to share that with you. And when Fred died, his daughter, Dare, and her husband bought the place from the heirs, and they've maintained it as a labor of love. And I came up here and helped Jim, and we worked on that house. And now the family has invested for us, a pretty healthy amount of money, putting a central air conditioning system in there, new windows, and boy, we're so proud of it. We could spit. I mean, we really are happy with it, and we have known all the time that we don't own the driveway. We get that, but at the same time, it's this place to us, and I submit to the town of Blowing Rock ought to be somewhat revered, because it is maybe the last nugget of the old days that still exists here in the town. And that house is not a lot different than it was in 1940. We are really dismayed over the situation, and And so now we're gonna have to drive out through it. It's a magnificent tunnel of a driveway to a paved parking lot. And, to get to the outside. And I would just submit that, for the plan to occur, a variance needs to be made. Another building needs to be allowed, or another complex needs to be allowed, another residential place. And the variances that are here that y'all wrestled with and wrestled with them well. And I just submit that I question whether your job is to maximize short-term rental opportunities for people that are gonna buy and rotate people out. And that's what this is. That's what drives the value, I understand. For us, the parking lot is gonna be, it's not gonna be nice. The pathway with people walking in and out, with lights on it at night, it's not gonna be nice. We realize it's not our land. We get that, but we would request that you deny the special use permit. Thank you.
Can you answer a question for us?
Sure.
Just so I understand,
Yes, sir.
the two objections that I heard and appreciate fully, and thank you for speaking first of all, but the two objections you said are the parking area down there straddling the driveway.
Right.
And then the potential for lights up on a pathway.
I mean, for us, it's gonna be, who knows, because every 3 days, it's gonna rotate out some more different people. So those are things that are, and then of course, the disturbance of the vegetation that goes along with everything. So those are things that bothers my wife, who is probably listening to this, may fuss at me and say, you should have said this, this, and this, but these are the things that I think that are of serious concern.
Just so I understand fully, so from your perspective, like is any development like just a problem, or is it just the stuff on the backside?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say don't do anything. I mean, not in my backyard. I get that. We can't say nothing, and we're not. We're just saying this is just too much. That's what we're saying.
Will any amount of screening help you at all?
Well, of course it'll help, but I don't know. It's hard, and these folks are pretty frank. I mean, it's not a final plan for even the design of the houses and everything. So sure, whatever happens, we'll be looking for some help. Absolutely.
If you had landscape screening along your property line there.
Yeah, it'll help.
Keep the lights and
sure.
Maintain them.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at your property on the satellite view.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I see what you're talking about. Where the parking is gonna be is, I can see how it could present a problem to you too if people decide to park more than 8 spaces in there and they start double parking, you're not even gonna be able to get out.
Well, and that's true. And then, of course, there's not going to be a parking guard there like there is at the rock shop. There's folks so that who's parking there, they park here on a busy Art in the Park day. Boy, they're going to be piled in there for sure.
And the address is 423.
Thank you. Thank you.
For Taylor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shame on me.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience who wants to speak? Okay. So just to refresh, this is a recommendation for you guys to town council, and it goes to a public hearing, so there will be another opportunity at that public hearing to speak. But our job is to prepare a recommendation for town council on this specific application. Saying that, we at least have two items that we need to address in that recommendation, and that's the variance for the additional unit, section 16-11.2. And the deviation from the maximum 12-foot retaining wall height. So those are two known conditions that we would need to comment on. Are there other issues that you would like to make town council aware of?
I'd like to see screening for these property owners to help protect their property as a requirement by the developer, so as not to cause them any more harm that's going to be caused if this were to be approved and built. And I mean extensive screening, not, you know, a tree and bush.
Along the property line?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to replace the arborvitaes with those that are recommended in E 10 through 16 for native plants, shrubs, conifers, and deciduous trees. I also like for them to look at the retaining walls, varying the distance between the walls so that maybe we can have varied vegetation there. Something that maybe breaks up, looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And I guess maybe screening those retaining walls between units that are visible. Sightline wise, there's no reason to screen something that's not visible, but there is one wall screen that.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to see.
So the one part of that that I don't like, just to say this, I think moving those walls closer to Main Street is a bad thing. I think one of the page 18 of whatever it was, but the photo that you had looking up there, Brian, I mean, we've all gone out there and looked at it probably, but one of the saving graces of this site is what's there already, the rhododendron. I think the more those walls start coming down that hill into that existing vegetation, to me, is a negative.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the varying height. It's just that lowest wall.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the anchor, right? From my perspective of not pushing that closer to Main Street.
Again, all I'm asking for is to explore it.
Sure.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that's a net gain. It could be 12 and 4. I don't know what that looks like. So all I'm trying to do is vary the vegetation between the walls.
And I just, the engineer in response to your questions about that said yes, but what that means is we're coming down, and like that to me would be, a shame to start going into more of those trees.
Again, but if you went, you got 8 and 8, 12 and 4.
I know what you said, but I also heard what the engineer said. Okay. And I'm just saying, from my standpoint, variation, fine, but that bottom wall shouldn't be moving closer to Main Street. That's my opinion. I mean,
I'll put it out.
Well, I still think I go back to my original concern, and that is what this looks like off of Main Street looking up. And we're going to have to do something to significantly screen that, or you're going to change the personality of that end of the town. And it's going to be stunning to all of a sudden look up and see 8 units on a hill. And we talk about the character and the charm and the historic value of what we have, and that could change that end of Main Street significantly. And that's a concern I had all the way back to the beginning.
So are you saying that we would be no development at all?
That's not an option.
Well, I'm saying, because what I think they have presented, from what I've seen so far, and I did a little good research before, is that they're going to dress the back of that up pretty good. I think that'll be at least decent looking condos, or whatever we want to call them. We call them residential if we want to try to pretend that too, okay? But whatever they are, the owners are going to make those decisions down with their POA at a later time, even after we're out here, you know? But the reality to it is what he's got planned looks pretty good, as long as we can keep those rhododendrons and we can keep the barriers between there. Because if you look up there now, you don't see anything. And I do agree that the houses up there, I didn't even know there were any up there for the 2 years I lived here. You know, the last 3 years I knew they were there. Tried to drive up their driveway, and I didn't do that real well either. But nevertheless, you know, I think there's going to be something built there. So we better look at what we're trying to protect the city and how we're getting something built. And, you know, it's better than a paint store sitting up there and you know, cement walls coming down. So I think if they can protect the vegetation, whether it's 2 walls or 3 walls, I think the walls look good. I know everybody had a big problem with walls in the city, but we've had rock walls in this city long before any of us were born, you know. So I think if they can do a nice rock wall, it'd be, I think it's a good look for the location. It may change it, but we've all had change in this city. At least it keeps it classic.
So do we have a consensus on the issues that, I guess you tried to write all these down?
I think if you get a consensus on, I think the wall is, I think we've got a consensus there, unless you want to specifically take a vote for it. I think you got a consensus on that. The other question is the unit.
What would be helpful if you are going to make, someone is going to make a motion with a list of recommendations to address these, that you be very specific, and then you can get a second, discuss, and then you vote on it as a group.
Each one.
All right. Any other comments or concerns that have not been addressed? Someone would like to make a motion?
Actually, can I ask Kevin a question first, or Brian? You know, Kevin had said that lower parking lot has to be paved. There's no option for an unpaved lot down there. And I don't know if the applicant wants it or not, but I'm thinking about aesthetics and other
You can
things.
make a recommendation, it's just consistency wise, if somebody else was to apply, hey, I want to do gravel too. The code says if it's used, well, I'll pull that up, but if it's more than so many days per week and more than a certain number of spaces, so there might be some flexibility where you could suggest a recommendation that for this particular lot, we want it to be gravel. Maybe it's not used as near as much as the other ones. I would guess that it's probably not. It would be an overflow lot, treated as such, but I'll look at that.
Yeah, I want to, I mean, part of this is it's somebody's property, and in theory, they can go build a parking space there if they want to, but I want to be sensitive to the context of that part of this property. We have a gravel driveway that's been there forever. It's, I assume, never, doesn't look like it's ever been paved. I've never gone down it, but just driving by, it looks like it's always been a gravel driveway. And sort of within that context, dropping a bunch of asphalt there, it's going to look stark. The other thing, and we heard this, I mean, I think if we put, if the applicant puts pavement down there and it's not being used, you are inviting an enforcement problem. I mean, it's just going to invite random people to park there.
Not for us.
Not for you.
For them.
Not for the town. I get that. I totally get that. But I'm not saying they're not still spaces, but if it were gravel, it would look like it's more in context and have an easier time of, again, I don't know if the applicant even cares about this one way or the other, but I would just think from sort of a defensive character, keep the character that's down there. That would be a better approach if we're gonna have those spaces.
I will point out, Chris, that the applicants did look at pervious surfaces, and we can accept pervious surfaces. They're the same thing as pavement, as long as the material's there.
Understand.
Our discussion with them and just our experience from staff is they don't work well up here.
Yeah.
There's too much maintenance and it ends up being impervious in the end. So that's why we discouraged it. I mean, it's a bad thing to discourage, but they just don't work up
Yeah,
here.
pervious pavement, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, they're problematic.
There's a lot of maintenance with the debris here, the salt here. And we just didn't want something that would turn into an eyesore, basically.
Yeah.
But gravel's a different situation. I mean, they're taking into account that this will be an impervious surface from a stormwater aspect. Gravel typically is a impervious surface over time.
I'll answer that. The requirement is, and so I may have said it wrong. If it's required to have more than 10 spaces and is used regularly at least 5 days per week, she'll have asphalt, concrete, or something that will be equivalent protection against potholes, erosion, and dust. So from the applicant's standpoint, they would save money, but in the end, there'll be some maintenance on the upkeep and keep it without potholes. But they don't have to, according to the code, pay that particular line.
We are thank you. We are a recommending body. I mean, my preference would be to, again, we have 9 people here, so everybody can decide about this, but my preference would be gravel, mostly from the character of what's already there, as well as discouraging its use, quite frankly, as a parking area, especially by people that don't belong there.
I wish you could see my driveway on a weekend.
Yeah, right.
No, I know. We got people drive up our driveway.
And it's a rock driveway. Let's just say that. The question I had was, another question I had is that same parking area. In the one of the slides, it shows the designated driveway and then the parkways on each side. Was that planned to have pavement on each side and leaving the driveway rock like it is?
My understanding, it would be the entire section.
And just so the rectangle would be, and then after it leaves the parking spots, it would go back to the regular rock driveway.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because there will be a concrete apron here to make all the transitions there.
And it looks like on the other side too, where it comes out, right? Going up to the houses, right there.
I'm assuming it would stop here somewhere.
Where this dark line is where the asphalt is.
Right.
And it's asphalt there to the concrete. But including their easement would be asphalt.
So the concrete apron would run to there.
And then asphalt all the way to where the driveway ties in.
So even if that was gravel, the parking area, you'd still have the concrete apron?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's for curb cut, for stormwater, ADA transitions, crossing.
Okay. So, hearing the issues that have been brought up, is there someone who would like to make a motion to, I guess, encompass all those into a recommendation? Or you want to do them individually, or how you gonna do this?
You can do them individually if it make it easier.
Yeah,
Someone may have a different opinion of each.
makes minutes a nightmare of that.
She can handle it. YouTube's a good thing. You can go back and look at. So I just encourage you maybe just to start with the retaining walls, and we feel like the motion there, any conditions.
Yeah, I mean, we could, that's definitely gonna be one. Deviation from the maximum 12-foot retaining wall height. Is there a motion to approve that or deny it?
So we're gonna do it individually.
Much to Taylor's demise. Unless you want to do a couple of them at a time. Maybe there are groups. Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of the 8 units, so that is the variance, the retaining wall, but with the additional conditions of substantial, and I don't know how we're gonna phrase this, but the substantial landscaping on the buffer on the south side of the buildings against the adjacent property. Second or next condition, encouraging the applicant to look at potential for varying the distances and heights between the north retaining walls, but with the provision that the lowest retaining wall does not move any further into the existing vegetation or any closer to Main Street than it's already shown on the plan. Encourage the applicant to look at, rather than asphalt paving for the 8 additional spaces, gravel lot, and leaving the space in between those 8 spaces as gravel as well. Again, addressing the comment from the neighbors of asking the applicant to not put lighting on that pathway unless it's necessary, but no lighting if possible to protect the neighbors.
Screening on the property. Screening on the property line.
Yeah, that's my first one, but I may not have said it very well, but yeah, see, the intent of that first one was vegetative screen along the property line.
If that's a motion, I'll second it. I think you nailed it.
That was the intent of the
Hang on,
motion.
Hang on, Steve, hang on.
Oh, hang on, it's something else. Well, I guess
Yeah,
second it,
just
and
because I
then
know
you
you're
have
getting tired of
discussion.
hearing from me. I do want to make sure that we look at replacing the arborvitaes with
So you-
the E10 through 16. I don't know, did you say that?
No, I didn't. I intended to include that, but I wouldn't have remembered the E.
I've been practicing all day.
Okay.
So.
Yeah,
For
so-
the record, it's arborvita.
Arborvitae.
You learn something every day.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Italian cypress.
All right, so yeah, including that in the motion of looking at replacing
Greg may have a comment.
arborvitae with the native plants.
And I'll second.
I just want to add one thing to the substantial landscaping for the neighbors, and that would be to have the neighbors involved in what is being planted there, and how it's planted, and how it looks, so that they're satisfied with it, and that it's not something that just comes in and gets done without their input. I don't know how you put that in motion.
I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, I don't think.
No. It's staff, it's our responsibility to carry out the ordinance.
Okay.
You make a recommendation, of course, like beef it up to a certain extent, but you don't leave it up to a neighbor to say. That may never be said. I'm not saying y'all wouldn't, y'all may say, hey, that's great. But you can't leave it up to a neighbor to be satisfied. It's not your.
But they can't have any input in it.
Oh, they
They
can,
will.
but you couldn't leave it up to say, when you check off, that you've met the criteria.
I just want them to have input in what goes into
Sure.
being put
Sure,
there.
that's okay.
Basically what I'm trying to say.
Staff's job will be to assess what's existing, what could be possible as supplemental, and then we can reach out to the neighbors.
I just like to weigh in on, I hope, and maybe there's a misunderstanding about our desire, is that there not be any parking at all, and it's just like, you get that, I hope, for sure. I just didn't want to make sure on behalf of my family, I sent the wrong message, so thank you.
in that light of that suggestion, you, as a recommendation, you could go as far to say, we could waive the additional, we would recommend to waive the additional 8 spaces that would be otherwise be required for any possible use of residential or short-term residential, if you so choose. They're meeting the ordinance by their design. If you feel like, well, maybe that's not a great idea, and you would make a recommendation, council then would follow up and look at the recommendations that you provide.
Actually, I'd like to see that done, just eliminate that parking. Because it's gonna create more problems than it's ever gonna solve at the end of the day. I mean, I know they're trying to meet the ordinance, but I'd like to see that as a recommendation to eliminate it.
That would be certainly up to you.
I think that will create a problem, if you want to know the truth.
Excuse me?
Whether, I said that, I think that will create a problem because the parking itself is going to be a difficult situation for those 8 units.
Well, you have
period.
16 spaces.
And it's our,
Yeah,
and
but with
it's our-
3-bedroom units, you're gonna have, if you've got 3 bedrooms and 3 cars for a unit, they're gonna have to park somewhere. And where are you gonna have them park?
May
Main
eliminate
Street.
the short-term rental aspect of it too, then.
Yeah, I doubt that. I hope it doesn't, because that's what we thrive on in our community, so. But the biggest asset that we have in building anything in Blowing Rock right now is to have the developers create parking. Because that means that people will not have to drive into our city to park, okay? And eliminate the pressure there. So if we have those 8 extra spaces, abuse or not abuse, whether we like it or not, I like it. You know, somebody's gonna park in there because they park in my driveway too, but the reality to it is that's 8 spots that are not being pressured downtown by these 8 units that are being built.
So you're gonna make it public parking, or are you doing?
No. It had nothing to do with, I would say illegal public parking is what's gonna happen too, but that doesn't matter. The question is that if you go on vacation, you bring your kids with you, and you probably have 3 cars.
No, I know, and I've never had 3 cars, I can honestly tell you that.
You don't have a big family, maybe. I got 11 aunts and uncles, okay?
If we eliminate the parking, what does that do to the pathway behind it? Do we still have to have that? No.
I think it'd be a good idea to keep them, so they can walk down Main Street instead of going all the way around.
So instead of it ending at the parking, then it would just extend on to the street,
Just walk on the driveway. I mean, on the gravel.
onto the gravel part, okay.
Waiving parking requirements for short-term rentals just would kill me. It wouldn't kill me, but it just.
I didn't say it was a good idea.
Yeah, I know, I heard you.
I just
You said it was an
you have
option.
the option.
You said it was an option, I heard.
If not here, where? For short term, if not here, where? I mean, it's in GB.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna put it?
Yeah.
Well, that's where it should be. In the area that's allowed, no expansions in the neighborhoods, we've never want that. We've never been interested in it, but it's allowed use.
All right, we got a motion on the floor and a second. We're not, I'm hearing a consensus that we're not adding Greg's amendment. Is that what I'm hearing?
About the neighbors having final.
Well, about deleting.
Deleting parking.
I call for a vote on what we got.
Call the question.
All right, call for a vote. All in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All in favor?
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And this is not taking one parking out.
I was trying to count you guys first. So,
Do you want to deal with that as a separate
So we voted on the original.
Original
Now,
motion.
now the parking would be a separate motion. Okay.
I thought it was one motion.
Taking it out, being a separate.
See,
Okay.
Yeah, I wanna take the parking out, that's what I
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Okay.
But you were for the motion?
Yeah, I'm for the motion, sorry.
But the motion included the parking.
Did you
She's
want,
gonna make a motion to take it out. Is that what you're saying? You're gonna make a motion to take it out now? Okay.
somebody?
I'll
want-
second it.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor to remove the requirement for the 8 spaces. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion dies, or fails.
Chairman, can we maybe make a friendly motion to the first one? I think maybe the applicant's worried about what would be considered substantial. Maybe put a little bit more predictability in what's expected of additional or substantial buffering. We will assess it for what's required per the ordinance. So the question is, how much more vegetation would we be looking at and what would be expected?
And this is for the wall in between the
I
units.
think it would be for the wall on the property line, the buffer on the property line, and then the walls. What is substantial there? Is it an evergreen hedge? Is it an X number of evergreens maybe we look at?
You got different classes of screening?
We do. And it could be something that maybe we double the vegetation, double the evergreens in those areas.
Is there a height requirement or minimum?
We have an 8-foot minimum height requirement for vegetation, or for evergreens at planting. You could request a larger tree. I don't know if that's viable being on the slope there. I think survivability, probably the 8 foot's probably a better situation there. So even a double the evergreens required for the ward, keep getting vegetation, the buffer per the ordinance, maybe some predictability that they can expect.
Like that grouping there of 4 in front of that wall should be sufficient. That's the first wall, go to the second wall. So you got 3 trees in front of that wall. So it's really the last wall, and it's not covered. We're not screened.
Well, this one is showing, you got 4 trees along that, underneath that third wall. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about in between the units.
Between the,
In between, okay, yeah.
In between them. So I think those walls, if you were to, we can look at the species of trees, that's not an issue. But maybe concentrating more in this area here and maybe tighten them up. I think to achieve maybe a hedge look. And I think maybe, with additional evergreen shrub type plantings, have some variation in there. We definitely don't want to put larger deciduous trees in there just from the root real estate aspect of it, but I think some smaller trees would probably be acceptable.
Rhododendron.
I think maybe, I think maybe just a requirement to have more of an evergreen hedge look.
Okay. Everybody good with that wording?
And that could be accomplished, I think, with this, all these walls. And then we can assess that property line there and add additional evergreens there.
Okay.
But truly, we'll need to probably assess what's there. That provide more clarity for y'all. I know it's still a little vague, but I think the hedge look or a hedge requirement could.
Rather than just more trees, add a hedge to it, in addition to trees you've already specified.
Yeah, I think that's our only concern is we're saving trees all along this, so are we blowing up existing trees to plant?
No, I don't think, I think the assessment would be for undergrowth type vegetation.
Filling in what doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, that's totally fine, I just want to make sure that, I guess we're just relying on your judgment to say, hey, we need to fill in this gap here or whatnot. We just need somebody that.
And you can give staff authority to, hey, we'll make our best judgment call out there with the amount of vegetation. But I think with a hedge look, now, the buffer requirements in the ordinance, they do allow separation between plants to allow for growth over time. So you know, even those buffers are truly not an evergreen screen at planting. But we can try to achieve that the best we can.
Will it look something like what we did at the farmer's market across the backside of that property?
Better than that.
Excuse me.
More than that.
But even along the backside where those tall evergreens were pretty tightly put together?
Yeah.
You're saying it'd be even more than that?
The requirement at this location is that it be opaque and it be 16 feet wide.
Okay.
What we have done in the past, on special use permits and other projects, is require 2 rows of plant material staggered in such a way that it will provide an opaque buffer.
Okay.
Now, given the slope of that land, it's not going to be where you can't see through it at all. But by preserving what's natural in there, that will help. And then augmenting the rest of it with some new plantings. We can do that at staff level. If that's a recommendation that you provide an opaque screen, that's what the code requires.
All right, opaque screen, let's have that.
And then we do need to take into account that if there's any existing trees there, we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, for sure. We don't want to take out anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to make
Just make a friendly motion that we would look at a double row top hedge.
do we use specific language, is like opaque, or do we use double row, or what do we use?
Opaque is what's required. So
Opaque, okay. I make
you
a
don't
motion.
really need to go much beyond that unless you want to do more than what the code requires. And the opaque screen is going to be 16 feet from here to the, nothing in there, no buildings in that strip, and that you have to plant it in such a way that it will grow up to be opaque. And no less than 6 feet at the time of planting.
What he said.
So I think give staff the approval to come up with the best.
So I need to make a motion that we provide an opaque screening for the property line on the south side to screen these folks' property from this development. Okay, is that specific enough?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion?
And then we'll be glad to reach out to the neighbors.
Thank you. Any other business?
Do we need to approve the minutes?
We
did. We did, okay. I missed it.
Need a motion to adjourn?
I do have one.
I don't know.
So we've got an opportunity that's been brought up from a few council folks. May 16th, there's a regional board workshop based on legislative zoning decisions, rezoning, conditional zoning, text amendments, a lot of things that you make decisions on. It is an online class, half day. We can, And we can leave it open to whoever's interested, but we can have it online here. And we can participate through this, it's through the UNC School of Government. We can participate. I'm pretty sure there'll be question and answer time. If y'all are interested in that, I'll fire an email out and see who's interested, and we'll just need to know names.
That's a planning board day.
That is a planning board day.
I will double check the time as well. And don't list it here. They're typically about a half a day, 3 or 4 hours. But I think it would be good information, especially for new board members, if you're interested. I can get an email out on that.
Okay.
May 16th. I'll get you some times on it. We do it we've done it for the Board of Adjustment training, for those folks, and it seemed to be a worthwhile thing to participate in. That's all I've got. Don't want any updates or anything.
Have you heard from anybody on the list?
Second on the adjournment. Okay.
What about the place just right down here, the little boutique hotel motel?
Who seconded that?
Right here.
We're waiting.
Sorry.
Thanks, man.
You got that person down?